Commander Thexanel dragged his wounded body through the sliding doors of the medical bay. Each step sent waves of pain through his massive frame. His purple carapace, once the pride of the Coalition military, now looked like a broken shell. Dark. Green blood oozed from multiple wounds across his chest and shoulders. His left arm dangled uselessly, the bone clearly shattered from some terrible impact. The sterile white chamber felt cold against his damaged shell. Bright lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the room. Medical equipment lined the walls, their displays blinking with alien readings. The air smelled of antiseptic and fear. Dr. Veltash looked up from her desk as he entered. She was a Zephyrian, her tall, slender frame covered in silver scales that caught the light. Her large, dark eyes showed concern as she took in his condition. She had seen many wounded soldiers, but never one this broken. Her 6 fingers moved quickly across her recording device, preparing to document what might be the most important testimony of the war. "Please, sit down, Commander," she said, her voice gentle but professional. "I know this is difficult, but Command needs to understand what happened down there." The Sonel collapsed into the specially designed chair, his weight making the metal. Grown, his breathing was labored, each breath a struggle. The medical scanners around the room began their work, reading his vital signs and mapping his injuries. The damage was extensive, but it was the look in his compound eyes that truly worried the doctor. She had seen that look before, in soldiers who had witnessed something that broke their minds. "The humans," he began, then stopped. His mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Doctor, how long have you been studying alien psychology?" 15 years, Commander. "I've treated warriors from over 30 different species." "Then you know fear. You know what it looks like when a soldier breaks." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I've fought the crystalline hive minds of Proxima. I've faced the energy. Beings of the Void Nebula. I've seen horrors that would drive most creatures insane." He paused, his whole body shaking. "But nothing prepared me for humans." Dr. Veltash leaned forward. The recording device captured every word, every tremor in his voice. "What made them different, Commander? They fight like they're already dead, like death means nothing to them." His 4 eyes stared at something she couldn't see. "We've conquered 47 worlds, Doctor. 47 different species have surrendered to Coalition might. They all followed the same pattern. Initial resistance, then fear, then surrender when they realized they couldn't win." The room's temperature control system hummed quietly as the Sonal struggled to find the right words. Outside the chamber, the massive Coalition flagship continued its journey through space, its engines vibrating through the hull. Thousands of crew members went about their duties, unaware that their entire understanding of warfare was about to change. "The intelligence reports said they were primitive," Thexenal continued. "Recent additions to space travel, basic weapons, simple military structure. Command called them barely evolved primates in the briefing." His laugh was bitter and broken. "We thought we were doing them a favor by making their conquest quick." Dr. Veltash made notes on her tablet. "What was your mission exactly?" "Standard occupation protocol." The planet held rare mineral deposits that the Coalition needed for ship construction. Population was small, maybe 50,000 humans spread across 3 settlements. Our scanners showed minimal defensive capabilities. No orbital platforms, no energy shields, no plasma weapons. He shifted in his chair, wincing from the pain. 3,000 Coalition troops against 50,000 civilians. It should have been over in hours, but it wasn't. No. The word came out like a curse. It wasn't. From the moment our dropships entered their atmosphere, everything went wrong. The humans didn't run. They didn't hide. They didn't try to negotiate. His voice grew quieter. They smiled. The doctor's scales rippled, a sign of confusion in her species. They smiled. Their leader, a human named Heian, actually smiled when he saw our ships landing. Like he was greeting old friends instead of an invasion force. I thought it was shock. Maybe some kind of primitive ritual. Now, I know better. This mandibles clicked again. He was smiling because he knew something we didn't. He knew what humans become when you threaten their home. The medical scanners beeped softly, indicating his stress levels were reaching dangerous heights. Dr. Veltash adjusted the room's atmosphere to help him breathe easier. She had interviewed thousands of soldiers, but none had ever spoken with such raw terror in their voice. "Commander, I need you to tell me exactly what happened on that planet. Command is planning similar operations on 12 other human worlds. Your testimony could save lives." Thexuno looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Doctor, there are no more human worlds to invade. By the time I finish this story, you'll understand why." The signs went distant as the memories flooded back. His breathing became shallow, and Dr. Veltash could see his vital signs spiking on the medical displays around the room. The dropships descended through the morning sky like metal rain. He began, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. 40 vessels, each carrying 75 of the Coalition's finest warriors. Our armor gleamed in the alien sun. Our weapons hummed with deadly energy. We had done this dance on dozens of worlds. He paused, his mandibles clicking softly. The human settlements spread out below us looked so peaceful, simple buildings made of local stone and metal. Gardens between the structures. Children playing in courtyards. It looked like a paradise we were about to turn into a conquest. Signs something was wrong came when their sensors detected movement in the buildings below. Not the panicked running they expected, but organized, purposeful movement. Humans were taking positions, not fleeing. My pilot, Lieutenant Kekstar, turned to me and said the readings must be wrong. Humans couldn't possibly be preparing to fight us. Their weapons were primitive, their technology centuries behind ours. The Senal's laugh was bitter. Kekstar died in the first 30 seconds of the landing. The dropships touched down in the settlement's main square. Coalition forces poured out, their plasma rifles ready, expecting immediate surrender. Instead, the silence stretched like a held breath. Windows stared down at them like empty eyes. The wind whispered through the streets, carrying scents of growing things and something else, something metallic. That's when we saw him. Yoon stepped out from behind a building like he was taking a casual walk. Yoon's tall for a human, with dark hair and calm eyes. He wore simple clothes, nothing that looked like military gear. But the way he moved, the way he carried himself, I knew immediately he was their leader. Heian walked toward the Coalition forces with his hands visible, but not raised in surrender. He stopped about 20 meters away and spoke in perfect Coalition. Standard, his accent strange, but understandable. "Welcome to our world," Yoon had said. "We've been expecting you." The XNOS troops had surrounded the human commander within minutes. Standard protocol called for immediate detention of leadership figures. But something about Hyan's calm demeanor made the Coalition soldiers hesitate. He showed no fear, no anger, just a quiet confidence that seemed impossible, given the circumstances. "I called for his surrender through my translator," Thexonal continued. "Told him resistance was futile, that his people would be treated fairly if he cooperated." That's when he smiled. The alien commander shuddered. "Your doctor, I've seen many. Different expressions of fear and defeat. That wasn't either." He smiled like he knew a secret we didn't. Hyun had looked directly at Thexunal and said something that chilled the alien commander to his core. "You came here expecting sheep, but we are wolves." The explosion came without warning. The ground beneath the Coalition forces erupted in fire and shrapnel. Heen had been standing directly over a carefully placed charge, and he triggered it, knowing full well it would kill him too. The blast tore through the Coalition's front ranks. Their advanced armor no protection against the raw force of the detonation. "Half my advance guard died instantly," Thexona whispered. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that we realized this human had sacrificed himself just to take out 30 of our soldiers. He could have run, could have hidden, could have tried to negotiate. Instead, he chose mutual destruction. In the chaos that followed, more humans appeared. They seemed to materialize from the very buildings themselves. A human named Tay led a group that had hidden in the settlement's underground utility tunnels. They emerged from manholes and drainage grates, surrounding the surviving Coalition forces. These weren't the terrified civilians the aliens had expected. These humans moved with military precision, their primitive weapons somehow finding gaps in Coalition armor. Their bullets were simple metal projectiles, but they were fired with deadly accuracy at weak points the humans shouldn't have known existed. How did they know our armor's vulnerabilities? The Axonal asked, though he knew Dr. Veltash had no answer. We guarded those specifications like state secrets, yet these humans targeted our joint seals, our vision ports, our breathing apparatus with surgical precision. A human named Wu had taken position on a rooftop with what appeared to be an ancient sniper rifle. The weapon was practically an antique by Coalition standards, yet Wu used it to pick off Coalition soldiers with impossible accuracy. Each shot found its mark, dropping alien warriors who had survived battles across the galaxy. The most terrifying moment came when they encountered Nara. She was defending a group of human children who had been trapped in a school building. Coalition forces had cornered her after a running firefight through the settlement's narrow streets. She was bleeding heavily from a wound that had nearly severed her leg, but she refused to surrender. I ordered my soldiers to accept her surrender, Thexanal said, his voice barely audible. She was obviously dying, no threat to anyone. But she didn't surrender. Instead, she did something that still haunts my dreams. Nara had looked at the Coalition soldiers surrounding her, then at the children behind her. Without hesitation, she had smeared her own blood across her rifle's targeting scope and continued fighting. The blood confused the Coalition's advanced sensors, making it harder for them to lock onto her position. She turned her own injuries into weapons, Dexanal continued. Used her blood to blind our equipment, used her position to protect those. Children used every breath she had left to keep fighting. She killed 6 of my soldiers, veterans of a dozen campaigns, before she finally collapsed. But even as Nara fell, the children she had been protecting didn't run. They picked up her weapon and continued the fight. Children who should have been learning mathematics and literature were instead learning how to kill Coalition soldiers. That's when Dexanal realized something that would change everything. These humans weren't fighting to win. They weren't fighting for glory or conquest or even survival. They were fighting to teach their enemies that attacking humanity came with a price so high that no rational being would pay it. The Coalition's shock troops, warriors who had never known defeat, began to hesitate. For the first time in their military careers, they questioned whether the mission was worth the cost. These humans treated death not as an ending, but as just another tool in their arsenal. The second day began with an eerie silence that made the skin crawl. His remaining 2,000 soldiers had secured the main buildings of the human settlement. But something felt terribly wrong. The streets were empty, too empty. No bodies, no blood trails, no signs of the humans they had been fighting just hours before. It was like they had simply disappeared into thin air, Dexanal told Dr. Veltash, his voice barely above a whisper. My scouts reported no movement on their sensors. Our thermal imaging showed nothing. Even our smell detectors, which could track most species across kilometers, found no trace of human presence. But the humans hadn't left. They had simply become invisible. The first attack came at dawn. Private Zeekmer was on patrol near the settlement's water treatment facility when the ground beneath him suddenly gave way. He fell 15 feet into what appeared to be a maintenance tunnel, but it was actually a carefully prepared trap. Humans had been waiting in the darkness below, and Zeekmer's screams echoed through the settlement before cutting off abruptly. We sent a rescue team, the Xanal continued. 8 of my best soldiers armed with plasma cutters and full armor. They found Zeekmer's body, but it was positioned strangely, like he was pointing toward something. When they moved closer to investigate, the tunnel exploded. Humans had turned their own infrastructure into a weapon. Every storm drain, every maintenance shaft, every utility tunnel had been converted into a potential death trap. A human engineer named Kang had spent months before the invasion preparing his settlement for exactly this kind of warfare. Kang was brilliant, Dexanal admitted with grudging respect. He understood that we would try to hold fixed positions, so he made sure there were no truly safe positions to hold.
Ouch.
Every building was connected to every other building through hidden passages. The humans could move through their city like blood through veins, while we stumbled around like blind creatures. In an alien maze, The psychological warfare began on the third day. Coalition soldiers would wake up to find messages written on the walls of their temporary barracks. The messages weren't in Coalition standard or even human language. They were images, symbols, that seemed to reach directly into the minds of the alien soldiers and twist their thoughts. The Zephyrians in my unit started having nightmares about being buried alive, Dexonal explained. The Krillians became paranoid about being watched. My own species, the Vorthok, began seeing symbols that reminded us of our ancient predators from our home world. His mandibles clicked nervously. Somehow, these humans had studied our psychological profiles, our evolutionary fears, our deepest cultural anxieties. Dr. Veltash's scales rippled with concern. But how could they have known such specific details about your species? That information is classified at the highest levels. That's what terrified us, Dexonal replied. These humans weren't just fighting with weapons and tactics. They were fighting with knowledge that should have been impossible for them to obtain. The sniper. Attacks started on the fourth day. A human named Day had taken position somewhere in the settlement, but Coalition forces couldn't locate him despite their advanced sensors. He would fire once, kill a Coalition soldier, then vanish completely. His shots came from different angles, each time suggesting he was somehow moving through the city without being detected. Day wasn't using advanced weapons, Dexonal explained. His rifle was actually quite primitive by our standards, but he knew exactly where to shoot to cause maximum damage. He targeted officers first, then communication specialists, then medics. He was systematically dismantling our command structure, one shot at a time. The most unnerving aspect of Day's attacks was their timing. He never shot randomly. Each shot was calculated to cause maximum psychological impact. He would wait until Coalition soldiers felt safe, then strike when they least expected it. Coalition counter-sniper teams were deployed to hunt Day down, but they found themselves hunting a ghost. Every time they thought they had located his position, they would find only empty buildings and cold trails. Worse, some of the counter-sniper teams never returned from their missions. We found their bodies days later, Vexenol said, his voice cracking. They had been positioned to look like they were still alive, still on watch. Some of my soldiers would wave at them before realizing they were looking at corpses. The human named Bin took the psychological warfare to an even darker level. He specialized in raids that targeted not just Coalition equipment, but Coalition morale. His team would infiltrate Coalition positions at night, not to kill, but to leave behind evidence of their presence. We would wake up to find our weapons had been moved slightly, Vexenol explained. Our food supplies would be contaminated with harmless but foul-smelling substances. Our communication equipment would be reprogrammed to play human music at random intervals. He paused, shuddering. The message was clear. We were not safe anywhere, at any time. But the most horrifying tactic was how the humans used their own. Dead bodies of fallen humans would be positioned in areas where Coalition medics were likely to find them. The bodies would be arranged to look like they were still alive, calling for help, reaching out in apparent agony. My medics are trained to help any wounded being, Vexenol said. It's part of our military code. When they saw what appeared to be wounded humans, they couldn't ignore them. His voice became hollow. The bodies were rigged with explosives. The humans had turned their own dead into weapons against our compassion. The explosive traps were sophisticated despite their primitive components. They used pressure sensors, motion detectors, and even sound triggers. Some would detonate immediately when approached. Others would wait until medical treatment was being administered, maximizing the psychological impact on surviving medics. After the third medic team was killed this way, my soldiers stopped responding to wounded humans altogether, Dexonal admitted. The humans had forced us to abandon our own moral code. They had made us into the monsters they painted us as. The walls of Coalition positions became covered with human messages written in blood. But this wasn't random graffiti. Each message was specifically designed to target the psychological weaknesses of different alien species. The humans somehow knew that Vorthok feared images of their ancestral predators, that Zephyrians were terrified of confinement, the Krillians couldn't stand the sight of their own blood. They were breaking us from the inside, Vexonal said. Every day, more of my soldiers requested transfer to other assignments. Veterans of dozens of campaigns were having mental breakdowns. We were winning every tactical engagement, but somehow losing the war. The settlement had become a haunted maze where every shadow might hide a human fighter. Every sound might be the last thing a coalition soldier ever heard. The humans had transformed their home into a weapon that used the coalition's own psychology. Against them, by the end of the first week, Exenol's proud force of 3,000 had been reduced to fewer than 800 effective soldiers. The rest were either dead, wounded, or too traumatized to fight, and the humans were just getting started. The seventh day dawned gray and cold over the human settlement. Dexenol stood on a ridge overlooking the mining complex, watching his remaining 800 soldiers take positions around the massive industrial facility. After a week of nightmarish guerrilla warfare, they had finally cornered the last of the human resistance. "We had them surrounded," Dexenol told Dr. Veltash, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and regret. The mining complex was built into the side of a mountain. It's only one way in or out. My tactical officers assured me that escape was impossible. 200 humans against 800 coalition soldiers. The mathematics were simple. The mining facility was enormous, a testament to human engineering despite their primitive technology. Massive excavation equipment sat silent in the morning air. Conveyor systems snaked between towering processing towers. The whole complex hummed with residual energy. From the mining operations that had been abandoned when the invasion began, coalition forces had set up a perimeter that completely surrounded the facility. Heavy weapons teams positioned their plasma cannons to cover every possible exit. Aerial drones circled overhead, their sensors scanning for any sign of human movement. This time, there would be no underground tunnels, no hidden passages, no mysterious disappearances. I opened communication channels with the humans inside, Vexenol continued. Standard surrender protocols. I offered them terms that were actually quite generous, considering what they had done to my forces. Safe passage off-world for civilians, military tribunals for combatants, according to coalition law. I even promised medical treatment for their wounded. The response came not from a communications device, but from a human who simply walked out. Of the main facility entrance, he was tall and lean, with short dark hair and eyes that seemed older than his face. His clothes were simple work coveralls, stained with dirt and oil from the mining operations. But he carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a military commander. This was June, Vexonal said. He walked toward our lines without weapons, without armor, without any apparent fear. My soldiers had their weapons trained on him, but he moved like he was taking a casual stroll through a park. June stopped about 50 meters from the coalition perimeter and spoke in perfect coalition standard. His voice carried clearly across the distance, calm and professional, despite the hopeless situation he faced. Commander the Sunel June had said, "I am Commander June of the Human Colonial Defense Force. I come to discuss terms." Nexenol had been surprised. Intelligence reports indicated that humans had no formal military structure in their colonies. Yet here was a man who spoke and acted like a trained officer, using proper military protocols and terminology. I advanced to meet him, Vexuno continued. Kept my weapons lowered but ready. June stood there waiting, his hands visible, no threatening moves. But something about his posture, his expression, made me nervous. He looked like a man who knew something I didn't. The negotiation that followed was unlike anything in Vexunal's military experience. June didn't plead for mercy or try to bargain for better terms. Instead, he asked detailed questions about coalition military doctrine, weapons capabilities, and strategic objectives. Questions that seemed strangely specific for someone in a hopeless position. "Why are you asking about our orbital support?" "Capabilities," Vexonal had asked. June's reply was simple and chilling. "Because I want to understand exactly how you fight. For future reference." That's when Nexenol realized something was wrong. This human wasn't negotiating for surrender. He was conducting an interview, gathering intelligence even in defeat. The meeting wasn't about saving human lives. It was about something much larger. I ended the negotiation immediately, Vexenal said. Ordered my forces to begin the final assault. We had plasma cannons, energy weapons, advanced armor. The humans had mining equipment and desperation. The outcome should have been inevitable. The assault began with a coordinated bombardment of the facility's main entrances. Coalition forces advanced in standard formation, expecting to find humans cowering in whatever shelter they could find. Instead, they encountered a defense that seemed impossible given the circumstances. The humans had turned the entire mining complex into a fortress. They used mining charges as improvised explosives, creating devastating traps throughout the facility. Heavy excavation equipment became mobile weapon platforms. Even the conveyor systems were weaponized, launching debris and mining tools at attacking Coalition soldiers. But the most shocking thing was their coordination, Vexenal explained. These humans fought like a trained military unit, not a group of desperate colonists. They used sophisticated tactics, coordinated movements, overlapping fields of fire. Someone had trained them well. June appeared at different points throughout the battle, always where the fighting was heaviest. He moved through the complex like he knew every pipe, every passage, every weakness in the structure. His commands were precise and effective, turning what should have been a rout into a grinding. Its costly battle Coalition forces slowly pushed deeper into the facility, but every meter was paid for in blood. The humans extracted a terrible price for each room, each corridor, each piece of equipment they were forced to abandon. They weren't just fighting to delay the inevitable. They were fighting to teach their enemies exactly how expensive it was to kill humans. We finally cornered them in the main processing center, Vexenal said. June and maybe 50 humans left alive, surrounded by 300 of my soldiers. I called for their surrender one final time. June had looked directly at the sentinel across, the chamber filled with mining equipment and the bodies of the fallen. His expression was calm, almost peaceful, like a man who had completed a difficult but necessary task. Commander June had said, in that same steady voice, "You came here thinking you were conquering a mining colony. But you were wrong. You were attending a school, and class is now over." That's when Vexenal noticed the equipment scattered throughout the chamber. Not just mining tools and weapons, but sophisticated recording devices, transmission equipment, data storage units. The humans hadn't just been fighting. They had been documenting everything. Every weapon we fired, every tactic we used, every formation we deployed, Vexenal realized. They had recorded it all, analyzed it, cataloged our strengths and weaknesses. Like scientists studying specimens. June smiled then, the same expression that Vexenal had seen on Hyan's face at the beginning of the invasion. Not the smile of defeat, but the smile of someone who had accomplished exactly what they set out to do. "Thank you for the education," June said. Then he spoke a single word in human language that Vexenal would never forget. Goodbye. The explosion that followed consumed the entire mining complex. June and his remaining soldiers had rigged the facilities, power systems, the mining charges, even the processed ore itself, into one massive bomb. The blast was visible from orbit, a pillar of fire that reached toward the stars. When the smoke cleared, Vexenal found himself among the few survivors. His forces destroyed not by superior weapons or tactics, but by an enemy that had turned their own defeat into victory. The humans hadn't been fighting to win. They had been fighting to learn, to gather intelligence that would be transmitted to every human world in the galaxy. "They died to teach their people how to kill us," Vexenal whispered to Dr. Veltash. "Every human who fell in that battle bought knowledge that would save thousands of their kind elsewhere. They turned their own deaths into weapons against the entire Coalition." The real horror came when Coalition salvage teams found the transmission equipment intact in the facility's ruins. The humans had been broadcasting everything in real time to receivers throughout human space. Every battle, every tactic, every Coalition weakness had been shared with every human military commander in the galaxy. The invasion of one small mining colony had become a galaxy-wide intelligence operation. And humanity had just graduated from their first class in Coalition warfare. Dr. Veltash carefully placed her recording device on the metal table between them. The soft hum of the device fell silent, leaving only the ambient sounds of the Coalition flagship's life support systems. She looked at Thexonal with a mixture of professional concern and barely concealed skepticism. "Commander, I've been treating combat veterans for over 15 years, she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What you've described sounds like severe post-traumatic stress disorder. These humans are a newly discovered species with primitive technology. They've barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Their weapons are chemical projectiles and simple explosives." Thexonal stared at her with his compound eyes, each one reflecting the sterile white lights of the medical chamber. His breathing was still labored, and his injured arm hung uselessly at his side. The medical scanners continued their quiet beeping, monitoring his vital signs and the extent of his physical injuries. "Doctor, you're making the same mistake Command made," he said quietly. "You're looking at their technology and assuming that tells you everything about their capabilities. But humans don't fight with just technology. They fight with something we don't understand." Dr. Veltash made notes on her tablet, her 6 fingers moving quickly across the surface. "And what is that, Commander?" "They fight with the absolute certainty that losing is not an option," Thexonal replied. "Not because they're afraid of death, but because they're afraid of what happens to their families, their children, their entire species if they fail. That kind of motivation makes them capable of things that should be impossible." The doctor's silver scales rippled with what might have been impatience. She had heard similar stories from other traumatized soldiers. Tales of enemies who seemed superhuman in their ferocity and cunning. It was a common psychological response to devastating military defeats. "Commander, I need you to understand that trauma can make memories unreliable," she said. "The mind often exaggerates threats to help process overwhelming experiences. Humans may have been more effective than expected, but they're still a primitive species facing the full might of the Coalition. You don't understand." Dexonal's voice exploded through the chamber as he slammed his good fist on the table. The metal surface dented under the impact, and the medical equipment around the room registered the spike in his stress levels. "They learn, they adapt. Every engagement makes them stronger while we remain the same." The commander struggled to his feet, his massive frame swaying slightly from his injuries. "We must warn the fleet, warn the Coalition. Every hour we waste gives them more time to prepare, more time to turn our own strengths against us." Dr. Veltash activated her emergency alert system. Within seconds, the chamber doors slid open with a soft hiss. 2 Coalition security guards entered, their own species equivalent of riot gear covering their forms. They moved with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who had dealt with traumatized veterans before. Commander Thexonal, the lead guard, said in a calm, professional tone, "Please come with us to the medical bay."
You need rest and proper treatment for your injuries?"
Dexonal looked between the guards and Dr. Veltash, his expression a mixture of desperation and disbelief. "You're not listening to me. None of you are listening. While we sit here debating my mental state, they're coming. They're already coming." The guards gently but firmly took hold of Thexonal's arms, supporting his weight as they began to escort him from the chamber. His protests echoed down the corridor as they moved toward the medical bay, but his words fell on deaf ears. To everyone else, he was just another soldier, broken by the trauma of an unexpected defeat. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Dexonal could see the normal activities of a Coalition flagship. Crew members went about their duties with the confidence of a military force that had never known true defeat. Officers studied tactical displays showing the positions of Coalition fleets throughout the galaxy. Engineers maintained weapon systems that had conquered dozens of worlds. "They have no idea what's coming for them," Thexonal whispered to himself. The medical bay was a marvel of Coalition technology, filled with healing devices and diagnostic equipment that could treat injuries from any known species. The guards helped Thexonal onto a treatment bed, where automated systems began to assess his wounds and prepare appropriate medical interventions. That's when the alarms began. The sound started as a low warble, barely audible over the ship's ambient noise. But within seconds, it had grown to a deafening wail that echoed through every corridor and chamber of the massive vessel. Red lights, flashed in sequence along the walls, and the ship's intercom system crackled to life. Admiral to all stations, the voice was tense but controlled. We have multiple contacts approaching our position. Unknown vessel signatures, moving at high speed toward Coalition space. All defensive positions, prepare for immediate combat. This is not a drill. Dr. Veltosh's face drained of color as she listened to the announcement. She looked at Dexenol, who had gone completely still on the treatment bed. The medical equipment continued its work. But the commander's attention was fixed on something beyond the chamber's viewport. Admiral, another voice came through the intercom, this one filled with confusion and growing alarm. These aren't unknown signatures. We're reading human vessel configurations. Multiple fleets approaching from 12 different vectors. The flagship shuddered as its engines came to full power. Through the viewport, they could see other coalition vessels moving into defensive formations, their weapons systems charging for battle, but there was something wrong with their movements. The formations were predictable, following standard coalition doctrine that had been unchanged for decades. They know exactly how we fight, Dexonal said quietly. They've studied every formation, every tactic, every response we're capable of. We're doing exactly what they expect us to do. The first explosions lit up space like artificial stars. Coalition ships began firing their massive plasma cannons at targets that seemed impossibly far away. But the human vessels were no longer where the coalition weapons were aimed. They moved with a precision and coordination that suggested intimate knowledge of coalition targeting systems. How are they moving like that? Dr. Veltosh whispered, watching the battle unfold through the viewport. Because they learned, Dexenal replied. Every shot we fired at their colony, every formation we used, every weakness we revealed. They recorded it all and turned it into a weapon against us. The human ships were unlike anything in coalition databases. They appeared to be built from salvaged coalition technology, but redesigned with human engineering principles. They were smaller than coalition vessels, but faster, more maneuverable, and armed with weapons that seemed specifically designed to exploit coalition defensive weaknesses. The flagship rocked as something impacted its shields. The lights flickered, and several of the medical devices emitted warning sounds. Through the intercom, they could hear damage reports coming in from throughout the ship. Direct hit to port weapons array, a voice reported. Shield generators at 60% capacity. Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Dr. Veltash activated the chamber's communication system. Medical Bay 2 bridge. We have wounded incoming from multiple departments, requesting immediate support. Bridge to all medical stations, came the reply. Prepare for mass casualties. We're taking heavy fire from human vessels, using unknown weapons configurations. A medical technician appeared beside Dexenal's bed, holding a sedative injector, designed to keep traumatized patients calm during medical procedures. But as the device approached his arm, Dexenal grabbed the technician's wrist with his one good hand. Look outside, he said, his voice barely audible over the sounds of battle. Look at how they fight. They're not just trying to win this battle. They're trying to end this war forever. Through the viewport, the human tactics were becoming clear. They weren't engaging in standard ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they were systematically dismantling coalition formations, targeting command, vessels, disrupting communications, and creating chaos in the coalition ranks. They're not fighting like a primitive species, Dr. Veltash realized. They're fighting like they've been planning this for months. Not months, Dexenal corrected as the sedative began to take effect. They've been planning this since the moment we set foot on their world. Every human who died in that colony died to make this moment possible. The flagship shuddered again as more human weapons found their mark. Coalition shields, designed to withstand the most powerful weapons known to the galaxy. Were failing under the assault of human technology that seemed specifically engineered. To defeat them, as consciousness began to fade, Dexenal looked out at the battle and saw the truth that no one else had recognized. The human fleets weren't just attacking, they were teaching. Every engagement was a demonstration of human capabilities, broadcast throughout the galaxy for all species to see. They're not just fighting to survive, he whispered, as the sedative pulled him toward unconsciousness. They're fighting to make sure this never happens again. They're showing the entire galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. The last thing that Xenil saw before the darkness took him was a human vessel destroying a coalition dreadnought with a single, precisely placed shot. The explosion lit up space like a new sun, visible to every world in the system. A message written in fire and energy for all to see. Humanity had graduated from their first lesson in galactic warfare, and now they were teaching that lesson too. Everyone else, the ship's lights flickered one final time as human weapons tore through coalition defenses that had been considered impenetrable. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as humanity revealed the true cost of underestimating a species that turned every defeat into a lesson, every loss into strength. The coalition had come to conquer a primitive world. Instead, they had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever: the END.